Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining another episode of the Backmarkers F1 Show podcast. This is episode 112, where we're going to be recapping the 2021 British Grand Prix. So thank you to everybody today for joining us, whether you're listening or watching us on YouTube or other audio platform. I'm your host, Chris Cato. Tonight, I've got my Backmarkers F1 Show co-host with me tonight. Full house back in store for this episode with Tyler McDonald and Shaker Barty. And Tyler, of course, was with me throughout the weekend doing some live streams for the sprint format, of course. And Tyler, how's it going? And, pretty quiet weekend, I would say, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I don't think much happened really. Quite the
No.
boring race. The sprint race, same thing, boring. But all around, maybe the worst British Grand Prix we've ever seen.
Yeah, I assume it's going to be a quick episode for us with not a whole
Yeah.
lot to talk about. Shaker, how about you? How's it going? I know you're back from your little road trip. It's good to have you back in your old studio.
Yeah, it's nice to be back. Finally to be back at home. But yeah, it's not a lot happened. So yeah, I just worked all weekend. I tried to watch your guys' live stream while I was at work, but with no audio, so I couldn't listen to it. But yeah, it was good. Pretty good weekend overall, I guess.
Yeah, and before we get into, of course, all of the activities in the race, I have to make a confession. Guys, unfortunately, the Backmarkers F1 Show has been outed as a Max Verstappen Fan Club channel. You
You
caught
have.
us. Yeah, you
Look
got
at
me.
you right now.
Yeah, you got me. I'm a Max Verstappen fan, can't stand Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, you guys got me. The keyboard warriors are right once again, so just had to get that out of the way early on, just so that you guys know ahead of this episode. But
Well, you're more orange than a McLaren right now, so
yeah, true. Maybe I'm just a McLaren fan, or
Hey,
maybe I'm just a big Phoenix Suns fan. They are playing Game
maybe
6 at the moment,
that's true.
so yeah. Just had to get that out of the way. Of course, so many Twitter experts were coming in, chiming in, which I'm sure we're gonna get to. All right, so let's get down to business here on episode 112 of the Backmarkers F1 Show. We are going to try to keep this as civil as possible, which I know that we will be between the three of us, because we actually have some differing opinions on, obviously, the incidents of this race. But that's the one thing about the three of us, is that we always have a good mutual respect and understanding, even though we have some different viewpoints on what happened. And of course, the big one is Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen at Copse Corner, which I'm sure will take up most of the time on this episode. So I've kind of already got my opinions out there already into the world. Tyler and Shaker, I will leave the floor to you just to start off with some general thoughts on the race and on the incident, and then maybe we can get more into kind of looking at the crash itself and doing a live breakdown.
Well, Chris, I mean, this was bound to happen. I mean, we've been talking about it for podcasts now, for weeks on end, saying there's going to be some point this season where they crash and there's going to be some controversy, because that's just what it is with a tight championship. We saw it with Nico Rosberg, and we used to see it a lot with Michael Schumacher when those championships were close, right? I mean, it's the nature of racing. And initially, I know the racing was phenomenal between them. Right off the start, a great jump by Lewis, almost got Max into turn one, but Max was, nice and steady, held his ground, and Lewis just kept chasing him throughout the whole course until they got to Copse, of course, and that's where the whole controversy started. And a very scary incident for Max. I mean, we don't want to see anyone take a 51G impact. Those are, you can tell. I don't know if you listen to the team radio, and if you haven't, it's out there. But how winded he was, which is very, very scary. I'm sure he was nervous, like everyone. And they didn't show the camera at first, or sorry, didn't show Max at first getting out of the car. Of course, being precautionary from the whole Grosjean incident. But it was great to see him walk out and be okay after that. And before I get into my opinions on the accident, I just want to get Shaker. What was your first reaction for seeing that accident? Because for me, I was sitting down at breakfast in a restaurant, and I screamed. The whole bar looked at me. I was like, "Oh!" And everyone was looking at me. So I don't know what your reaction was, but
Yeah, so I was in the bushes, so I had no signal on my phone. But all I got at one point, I think it was probably an hour after the race, was my buddy messaging me that Max Verstappen got into a really bad car crash. So around the time when I could pull out my phone. As soon as I saw it happen, my first reaction was, A, is he okay? Because obviously I still didn't really have internet to go check what was going on. But yeah, A, is he okay? And B, uh, well, I think I had found out it was only a 10-second penalty at this point, and I'm like, how is it only a 10-second penalty? Was my first reaction. Um, but besides the fact, it just, when you first look at it, it does look like a racing incident. But once you do see all the different angles, I think I have my opinion on the matter, which we'll get into later on. But yeah, it was quite a brutal accident. Overall, yeah, I really don't know what else to say.
Now, Tyler, before I come back to you just to get your thoughts and sort of breakdown of the incident, would it be helpful if I brought up just a video of the crash itself, and then you can kind of walk us through your thoughts of who was to blame and how you saw the incident?
Yeah, absolutely. I think let's do that because I know it's going to be a 2-on-1 here, and I'm going to get tag teamed by both of you guys. But that's okay. I'm ready to defend myself.
God, Tyler, you're such a Lewis fanboy.
Hey, I still think it's Lewis's fault, but I think it takes two to tango, as was said.
Okay, so this is the look here. Hopefully, we won't get flagged for this by the YouTube copyright sharks. I'm taking it from Twitter, so it should help us. But I'm just going to kind of scroll through it this way. So, Tyler, talk me through. So, we're starting the clip here sort of as we're rounding the corner outside of Luffield and heading into Copse corner. So as Hamilton is into the slipstream, talk us through what you thought, Tyler, and how you saw this incident playing out.
Oh, a great run by Lewis through Luffield, like you said, and he really got a lot of closing speed on Max here, and he's got to make that move. So where's Max going to defend? So stop right here. So Max makes a first move down toward the inside. So automatically, that's where Lewis would probably want to go. So Lewis is going to say, okay, well, I'm going to go even further. So if we go a couple more frames, Lewis then now makes his move to the inside. Now Max, you can stop it there. Max does not give him any room on the inside. He squeezes him right toward the wall. I mean, they were crazy close to that wall. And that compromises both of their entries going into Copse. Obviously, it's going to be harder to clip that apex for both of them. So if we go a couple more frames as we slowly break this down, now here, Lewis is just alongside of Max Verstappen, and he will get a little bit closer as we go. Keep going.
Sorry
right
about that.
there. No, it's all good. So as Lewis is getting in, Max is taking a little wider so he can get the apex. If we stop right here, Lewis is alongside Max. And in my opinion, they are both eligible for that corner. So, as we keep going. So, here's where we break it down. This is where we'll back it up a few steps. Back it up a few before we get into the accident. So, as we're entering the corner, Max obviously has to try to get the apex, but has to know Lewis is right alongside him. Lewis as well has to turn in a little bit further, I would say. He did not clip that green and white line near the apex of the corner, which he did when he passed Charles Leclerc. So I will say Lewis could have been a little bit closer to the inside of that corner. But at the same time, for Max didn't really leave him much room at the same time to try and also for Lewis to also make that corner. And when you're driving, I know this is all happening 190 kilometers an hour or miles an hour. And the margin for error is, just a few inches. Is Max thinking he's going to back out there? Is Max realizing that Lewis is going to have a compromised apex just due to the fact that he had to enter the corner so narrow? And these are all factors that had to play into the accident. So in my opinion, yes, Lewis should have backed out a little bit. And it looked like he did at the end because you saw how fast Max pulled ahead. Entering the corner, and they just barely clipped wheels. So it looked like Lewis was lifting off, and I think that's one of the reasons why it was only a 10-second penalty, because they would have the telemetry and all the throttle data as well at the FIA. But if you're Max as well, this is also an aggressive defending move by Max, forcing Lewis as far as he can toward the inside wall, trying to cut off his apex and to take the corner along the outside. And that's where we saw the two of them collide. And obviously that very hefty crash from Max Verstappen. And I don't know if you've seen, if people listening have seen the fan video from the fan that was at sitting,
right here.
in the, here you go, in Copse. And this is just an crazy video. Take your breath away.
So I think this was one of the most viewed ones. I know there's a couple of other angles. And go ahead.
Chris, if you stop the video right there. Now, the biggest thing that really bugs me about this video is Buddy right in front of you didn't take the tag off his hat. And I couldn't stop staring at it. For like every time I watched it, all I could see was this guy's tag sitting like still on his hat. Buddy, take the tag off your hat. You're at the race. You don't need to return it after the race. Like, oh.
Maybe it was depending on who would win the race. If they didn't, he'd return the hat.
Yeah,
maybe it's be all sweaty. Look at it; you look sweaty in that hat. Like,
white
oh,
too. It would get dirty. Look at that. Well, it's definitely dirty now.
Well, that's right. It's definitely dirty now.
It's the Brits. What do you expect? And just also before we move on to Shaker, the reason there's an extended video on YouTube that shows the recovery afterwards, they had to wait, the marshals did, to access Max's car because it was unsafe electrically. And of course, because some parts must have gotten exposed, and of course if you touch that car and we don't have the proper safety equipment, you obviously could get electrocuted and die because it's that dangerous. So they had to wait until the car was safe, and then they could extricate Verstappen out of the car. So that was actually very well done, Tyler. It wasn't as fanboyish as I thought it would be.
No, because I do think it was, in the end, it is Lewis's. It is I'd say 70% Lewis's fault, 30% Max's fault. And in an accident, there are two culprits to an accident for the most part. I mean, usually there is someone to blame. And I think Max could have been less aggressive in his defending, and that would have avoided the accident as well. We see how Lewis in his championship runs, how much defensive driving he does to avoid accidents, to ensure that he doesn't get DNFs like this. And in the same instance, it's something for Max to learn. Max is an aggressive driver. Lewis usually isn't an aggressive driver, but he knew he had to make a move here to try and come back in his home race. So I think personally 10 seconds is warranted. I thought that was going to do more damage than what it actually ended up doing, because I thought that if team orders weren't into effect with Bottas, that would have hampered him a lot more. If Lando Norris didn't have a long stop, that would have hampered Lewis a lot more. So a lot of things did go right for Lewis, for him to make that 10-second penalty less harsh, I would say. The only thing maybe you could say is, if you make it a drive-through, I don't think a stop-go. I think that's too harsh. I think the most you could go through is a drive-through, but 10 seconds for me was good enough.
We're going to be back into the podcast in just a second. We just wanted to give a quick shout-out and thank you to the sponsors for this podcast. Support for the Backmarkers F1 Show is brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming champions of the world. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0, and you can join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you guys. You can get 20% off and free worldwide shipping when you use the code BMF1Show at manscaped.com. And the craftsmanship and the details on this trimmer is exceptional. And we know in the F1 world, it's all about being as aerodynamically efficient as possible, and Manscaped's Lawnmower 4.0 will help you do just that with an incredibly comfortable grooming experience. You can utilize the wireless charging system and, of course, the great little LED light so you never miss a spot and so that you're looking good and smooth on and off the track. So use the code BMF1Show to get 20% off and unlock your confidence, and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. And of course, our longtime podcast sponsor, thegpbox.com. Head down into the description below and use all of the promo codes and links there to get some exclusive discounts off of some really awesome motorsport memorabilia, merchandise, and used car parts. So check that out at thegpbox.com.
And
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
get into why after the 10 seconds is, but I've been talking for a while, so.
Yeah. No, you brought up some good points, actually, some different points as well that I haven't heard in much of the analysis. So a good job for you on that one. And yeah, we'll get to the penalty afterwards. But Shaker, I saw you were shaking your head at certain points of Tyler's analysis. So if you want, I can go through it again and to get your take on it.
Let's reset.
Oh, boy.
Okay. I just want to comment on your aggressive driving thing with Lewis Hamilton. The thing is, Lewis Hamilton was driving aggressive in this first lap of this race, chasing down Max Verstappen. So what's stopping Max from being aggressive on the defense on the way back? You know, like why? It's just so again, yeah. So you can go through this. I want to go back to the first defensive move that Tyler mentioned here. So right here, when he goes into the inside corner, right here, Lewis Hamilton's already caught up to him, so he knows he needs to go on the defensive. We saw Lando Norris pull this move like 2 weeks ago in the last race against Lewis Hamilton, where he went on the inside, tried to trick him a little bit, go back on the outside. So I have no problem with this right here. I think this is a proper move to try and defend him off because he's trying to cover off and get the apex into this corner. So I think, so go back a little bit, Chris. So keep going. At this point right here, when Lewis Hamilton is catching up to him, Max is already thinking about going into this right lane. He's already started this move because Lewis has started to catch up. So now if you move a little bit forward, so Max gives him the space a little bit here, and Lewis still continues to go for it despite knowing the space is not there. So I think they're both playing aggressive here at this point, both trying to Max trying to get the defense, Lewis trying to get the offensive move off. And now if you move forward, stop right here. This is not side by side. Max is still ahead, in my opinion.
What?
They're
Like
not. When
a
you
wing?
Yeah. It's not even a wing, though. Like, we've seen side-by-side, wheel-to-wheel racing. I think Max still has a proper line to go take this.
So does Lewis, though, in my opinion.
But I do agree with you, Tyler, that it does take two to tango, so I'm not blaming Lewis 100% for this as well. I think it's more 80-20, in my opinion. But I think Max still has a proper line to go take the apex. And if you keep moving forward a little bit more, wherever it is. So, okay, go back. Okay, go forward a little again. Sorry, I missed the point where I was trying to go. So right here is when Max starts his move in. I think so. Lewis doesn't have space. I guess you guys can't see my mouse where I'm pointing. I'm
Thinking like, I don't know if you can see mine.
Yeah,
either.
right there. Yeah, right there. So at this point, Lewis still has the space to go for it, man. Like, look at the car width that he has. They go up on these curbs all the time, right? So you can play the rest through. I'm pretty sure I made my point that I made because we already know what happens here. But yeah, I do agree. It does take two to tango, but I think I think Max had more of the proper line in this one, and I think he just played more of an aggressive driving style. And we saw him do this 2 years ago at the Australian Grand Prix against Charles Leclerc, where he was the one who was behind and he was the one who pulled the aggressive move and still ended up getting the proper line all the way through. And Charles Leclerc, I think it was a 5-second penalty that. No, did anyone even get a penalty in that one? I can't remember. But anyway.
No, it was deemed a racing incident.
Yeah, it was deemed a racing incident.
Now, it did help that they were both out of the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So there was no one continuing. So I feel like that would play a big difference.
Yeah. I think the only difference in that situation was that Max Verstappen was a little bit further ahead than Lewis Hamilton. He was almost side by side, a little bit ahead of the car, where Lewis in this situation wasn't. I think is the only big difference. But yeah, I think those are my points.
So, I want to bring. They're very good points, Shaker. Like they Max Verstappen side of it, you're completely right. I want to bring up though a comparison, and we all remember the famous Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg incident in Spain, where Nico Rosberg forced Lewis off the track into the grass when Lewis was trying to make a pass. Who did we blame on that accident? We blame Nico Rosberg for squeezing Lewis Hamilton off the track. Is this not a similar scenario, except there was a wall there, so he couldn't really squeeze him off the track?
I don't believe that he was squeezed off the track, though. I think he had enough
couldn't.
space.
There was a wall there.
I mean, there was okay. I think he had enough room to pass. I think he had enough room to pass, and if he didn't, he should have backed off because he didn't have the proper line to do it. You know, like if he doesn't have the space and he doesn't have the proper line, and Max is already ahead of him throughout this entire corner, why continue going for it? You know,
I think that's a good comparison to squeeze. Like when we're thinking of where to try to compare who we blame the different incidents, like that's an incident in 2016 in Spain where we saw two drivers going hard for the same corner on the inside and one driver squeezing the other driver. This, in that case, off the track. This case, he couldn't squeeze him off the track because there's a big wall there, but squeezing him so that he didn't have a line going into the corner. And I'm all good for hard racing. I think it was, and if there was no contact here, we would have been like, oh my God, these two are what a masterclass by these two drivers. I mean, look at the perfect driving from Max and Lewis and to get through Copse. I mean, it is a matter of inches. From now, we're talking about blames and who had an accident to look at these two world-class drivers wheel to wheel, so close to making these moves pull off. So,
no, I think you guys bring up two good points there, and definitely some good points through that whole argument. And I just wanted to that point, Tyler, I'll share the screen again just so you guys can maybe see my take on it. I would disagree in that comparison with the Spain one because I think that this corner specifically is a very specific corner because of the high-speed nature, and it's one of the fastest ones in all of the F1 calendar. So I think it's a little bit different than, I believe, what is turn 4 or 5 in Barcelona, if I'm not mistaken, where the two collided. But I just wanted to show people that, to Shaker's point, and I know that some other people were saying this too, that they were alongside, but they weren't 100% side by side. So if
one thing,
if you take a look at Lewis's left front tire, it's never in line with Max's right front tire, which then I would consider their side by side. If they were, then I think that most likely you would have seen Verstappen run wide like Charles Leclerc did when he made the move on Lewis Hamilton, or vice versa. Excuse me.
Which was a possibility that Max could have done to avoid a collision.
See, this is where I would disagree with that, though. If you watch Max, this board right here, roughly, which if I remember correctly is the 50-meter board, but I could be wrong. It's roughly the turn-in point where Verstappen is going to start to open his steering toward the right so we can make this corner because it is a high-speed corner. I think it's important.
100. I think that's the 100.
That's 100? Okay, yeah, sorry, you're right here.
50 meters coming right there.
50, okay, so at the 50 is when they're going to start turning in, slightly a little bit before that. So I think that what people need to also remember is that Max is on the natural racing line to this corner. If you're on a hot lap at Silverstone, you're never going to take this corner on the inside. Never.
Absolutely.
Because obviously, as just basic racing, you're going to open, trying to minimize the angle of the corner, so coming from the outside, going in. So I don't think here that Max could have given him more room, because for me, he would have ran wide here into this area, in which he might have damaged his car like we saw George Russell do in, I believe, practice, or if it was qualifying, not mistaking, and he cracked his mirror. And then not only that, might have gotten track limits as well. So I think that in that high speed, high load of a corner, it's really difficult for him to give him more room because it's not a slow 90-degree type of corner. And then I also think that the other important part of this is a video that I referenced that was from the Driver 61 YouTube channel, by Scott Mansell, who's a professional racing driver coach, and he's raced this track many, many times, which it's in our Twitter bio. I will put it in the link in the descriptions down below because, in my opinion, it is the best analysis on this accident. It's completely non-biased. He's British, so you can't say that he's a Max Verstappen fanboy. And he just does a great job sticking to the technical aspects of this crash. And I'm just going to pull up a quote from the video. I don't want to play the whole video because I want you guys to check it out for yourselves. But he says, quote, "When you're positioned on the inside going into any corner, you have to be more conservative. the stakes are higher compared to going around the outside. And he basically just goes on to say that you're going to hit the car on the outside if you get some oversteer or understeer. And the problem was, and that a lot of people don't bring up in this incident, is that Hamilton did get a lot of understeer going into that corner, which is why he ended up hitting the right rear of Max. And then Scott also in his video brings up a lot of excellent points, that it's the first lap. We're talking about heavy fuel loads and also the fact that tires aren't exactly up to temperature. So it's just, he didn't do it on purpose, just ended up making that slight mistake there, and then just unfortunately went into Max. But I would agree with Scott's assessment that, especially into that corner, like Horner said, that's not necessarily a corner where you try and half-heartedly stick it on the inside, and there's just a lot of factors that go into play for that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch this video because that is a very good analysis on it as well, just from the quote there. And you know, there's going to be lots of different opinions on this accident. It's going to probably fuel, you know, the rest of the season. This is going to be, you know, something to talk about through the whole summer break. We saw how animated Christian Horner was, how animated Toto Wolff was, and now, you know, they're butting heads on their analysis. And I do want to bring up Christian Horner because I did think that, no, yes, he's protecting his driver. And I know that's very important. You know, if you're a coach in whatever sport, soccer, you know, hockey, football, you protect your players. You always are on their side because you don't want anything bad to happen to them. And it's the same scenario here. Christian Horner is protecting Max Verstappen and everything that happened. But I did think his comments were a little aggressive. They were kind of like petty. They seemed sort of out of an ill will to Lewis, that he, you know, it was weird. It was like, you know, he was complimenting Lewis to knock him almost, and I didn't think that was very necessary from Christian. And I think it was Marco Helmer who was saying that Lewis should get a race ban, which is completely ludicrous. You know, I don't think that's you know, any sort of has any sort of malice to it, or sorry, any sort of body to it, I should say. On the same side, Toto Wolff is protecting Lewis. You know, Toto Wolff was saying, well, you know, here's, you know, emailing Michael Massey about the diagram. You know, like that diagram isn't, you know, necessary either, I don't think. And, you know, obviously they're trying to both get as the most severe or non-severe penalties depending on what party they're in. But, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see those two interact, Horner and Wolff, because they have a lot of respect for each other, but two very completely different views on this incident.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how that goes as well, because like in the end, it does bring the championship to much closer, and it does make the rest of the season way more exciting to watch, because now you know, I think what, they're between 20 30 points of each other now.
Yeah, something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, it just make the season more exciting to watch. Because I think at this, you know, if he had Max had won, he would have been like 50 points of ahead. Which is exciting in the end. It's kind of sad to see Max go out the way that he did. But yeah, it should be. I'm really just excited for the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's gonna be an awesome race, I think.
But yeah, it's race ban is a little bit excessive, but you do have to think about it, point of view that, you know, Max was most likely bound to win that race. He was leading all weekend. He gets no points from that race. Lewis ends up winning it. So race ban is excessive. It's too bad you can't like get points taken away or like a, you know, -5 or something like that. But yeah, I do agree. Race ban is a little bit too much for him to say that. And I think in the end, you know, I think one of you guys already said it. If the accident didn't happen, in the end, it would have just been considered a racing incident. If Max, you know, just ended up going to the sand, ended up driving out of it, it would not been as you know, as harsh of an incident that we would be talking about it now. I think it's the impact itself, which makes it worse than it is. Because obviously 51 Gs is a whole lot. But yeah, I think, you know, if he had just maybe just gone into the sand a little bit, most likely would have been considered a 5-second penalty, you know. Racing incident would have been left at that. But yeah, I think that's where I leave it at.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, Shaker, as well. If we just saw like a little bit of a touch and a broken front wing or a puncture, something, it wouldn't have been nearly as bad, and it probably would have been a 5 second penalty to Lewis.
Hmm.
But the impact, and the way that, Max was out of the race, obviously played a factor in the penalty. And we see with sports, injuries shouldn't play a factor in a referee's decision.
Yeah.
So no matter what, thank God Max was okay. But they have to look at the incident and not the end result, I think, in
Hmm.
my opinion. Because even if Max would have got spun off and he stopped in the gravel, I still think that's a 10-second penalty to Lewis.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think the impact really gave me a reason why it should be more or it should be less. The impact was terrible, and you hate to see that. Kudos to the safety of the F1 cars, and the good job they've done at Silverstone to make sure that that impact was absorbed as much as it could be. Because I have to admit, those tire barriers did a pretty good job. I was impressed with them.
Hmm.
But that's something that is going to happen in racing, unfortunately, and it's scary. But we hope to not see it as much as we had the last half a year with Grosjean, obviously, and this time with Max.
With Charles Leclerc as well. It kind of
Yeah, Monza.
shows,
That's right.
yeah, she kind of really shows you the importance that safety's played in the last 10 to 15 years, even the last 5 years with the Halo being introduced. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember at Spa, Kevin Magnussen losing it, going up Eau Rouge and going into the tire barriers, and his headrest came flying out. That's how hard he hit the tire barriers. I don't know what the G-force was on that, but it had to have been close to Max's. And same thing, he was winded but walked away. So I mean, the structural integrity of the F1 cars is phenomenal from what it was back in the olden days, I guess you could say.
For sure. And I think you guys brought up very good points for both sides of the argument. I think that it's understandable, and I think maybe the video that I did too, some emotion played in that, of course, being right after the race. And I think I understand people's reactions, though, because it was such a high-speed corner. That's why they were upset with Hamilton for doing that kind of risk, because it was a risky overtake, in my opinion. I still stand by that. But now it's a risk and it's a danger that they all accept. So I don't think that that's necessarily what the main issue was for me, but I also just think my final thoughts on it too, that saying that Verstappen, like you said, Tyler, I didn't see many people bringing up that point about him being aggressive early, which I completely agree with you. His defense was aggressive there, which to me was fine, but when he was actually turning into the corner, I don't see how people could say that he was aggressive when he's the leading car turning into that corner.
Yeah.
He's the defender.
Yeah,
And
and I
No,
would
I
agree with that
agree with you
statement.
yeah.
there
So
too.
I think there's, and I think that we also have to, and I'm glad that your analysis, Tyler, actually, hopefully will shed light on some of the Team LH supporters out there that there is a balance in this argument. And I think that we need to define racing incident as, I believe it was a racing incident, but at the end of the day, I also believe that it was Lewis Hamilton's fault that deserved a penalty. So I think we need to separate racing incident, which this was, from a deliberate action, which would have been, for example, Lewis opening the steering all the way to the left, right? That
Yeah.
wouldn't be a racing
Yeah.
incident. So I think that's where people
Absolutely.
kind of got lost in this debate and they got very heated against each other. I think the overwhelming majority saw that it was Lewis's fault, but that, yes, it was a racing incident. They were both racing hard. They were both racing aggressively. But in the end, we would put more blame onto Hamilton. So I think some clarification there hopefully will help kind of calm the waters a little bit.
And I feel if roles were reversed and Hamilton was on the outside and Max is on the inside, Max would have gone for that hole as well.
Oh no, absolutely.
So
They're
you know,
racing drivers,
yeah,
like
exactly.
that's you look for the hole, and if the hole opens up, you go for it.
Yeah.
I think it's completely circumstantial, right? Like Chris mentioned, if it wasn't a high flying corner and it was a different corner, a 90-degree turn, would have played out so differently. But I think it's just all circumstantial in the way we look at it. And it's just nice that we have so many different angles to do that. It's but yeah, I agree. It really, really depends on, if it was a battle for fourth or fifth place, we could have seen it as a different incident as well. A battle for like the 20, battling for 10th place. So, yeah.
I will say one thing that bothered me from Max, and I might get some hate on this, But when he posted he was calling Lewis disrespectful for celebrating after the race. That whole podium in Bahrain was celebrating while Grosjean was still in hospital with his burns. So it's a two-edged sword. It's sword there. You can't say, well, he's disrespectful for celebrating when I was in hospital, but he's both everyone, whoever was on the Bahrain podium. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Max was there and Lewis was there. They were all celebrating after Grosjean's incident on the podium in the same way. So
I just wanted to bring up. I don't know if he was, it would be context, right? I would want to know what he was saying. Was it disrespectful? Was it because he was in the hospital because of that precise reason? Because we will acknowledge, yes, Hamilton didn't know that he was in the hospital until I think after he got out of the car.
Pen.
Yeah, media pen.
Yeah.
So that's fine, and he did ask if Max was okay. That's great. That's fine. I think I would agree with Matt. Well, I don't know if disrespectful is the right word. I will be honest to say this, and like you just said, Tyler, the Hamilton fans already don't like me, so that's fine. It is what it is. But I found that his post-race celebrations, along with Mercedes, were distasteful. And the reason why was because he was celebrating as if he just pulled off this miraculous drive like he did last year in Turkey. If you guys remember that Turkish Grand Prix last year, he started, 6th or 7th, ended up winning the race in those wet conditions. Incredible drive, right? Clinched 7th World Championship, one of his greater drives of his career. This, to me, was not even in the top 90 of his career wins, and he's got 98 wins. And the reason why is because I look at his win and say, you knocked out your championship rival, the guy who was leading the championship. You knocked out the race leader in a racing incident, but that most people deemed was your fault. Then you get the red flag, which we find afterwards in the race ended up saving your race for the second time this year again because they got to repair the car. Then you get the weaker penalty, which we're going to get to in the next couple of minutes. You come out in 4th place. You easily get by the McLaren. You come up behind your teammate. Valtteri Bottas almost gets out of his car and goes for a beer because of team orders that come in again. So you're back into 2nd place. And then you pass a Ferrari, which, guys, let's be honest, Leclerc had an amazing drive, but the Ferrari's been sometimes the 5th best car this season. And the Mercedes W12 is arguably still the fastest car, and we know how big that gap is between the first 2 cars and the rest of the field. So I just looked at that celebration, and I go, and some people were saying, one of the greatest drives ever, and I go, guys, I mean, this is, I don't find this one very impressive. And we say it for the millionth time, Lewis Hamilton was a great driver, one of the greatest ever. And just to touch on that about, the biases and everything like that, roles reversed, if it was Max doing it on the inside, oh my God. I mean, you can't imagine what the Team LH supporters would be saying. But on this channel, we'd be saying the same thing too, if that was Max Verstappen in Lewis Hamilton's shoes. And people probably aren't going to believe that, but if it does end up happening in Hungary, where Max Sainz was on the inside and knocks Lewis out of the race, we'll be sitting here on a Monday or Tuesday evening saying, yeah, it was Max Verstappen's fault. So
I think the situation is we have been there. You think of Monaco of last year, where Max was so close to catching up in the 5th or 6th lap, and he went for it, and everybody just said he was an immature driver. He's young. He went for the hole that wasn't there. He ended up knocking Lewis Hamilton out. I think, yeah, there's a lot of Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton fans out there. It's going to be a sided debate, no matter what incident we get into, but that's what makes it so exciting. It's racing. It's hard racing, and it's a racing incident, like you said, Chris, in the end. But yeah, it's a tough one to get heated about for sure.
To be fair to Lewis celebrating, it was his home Grand Prix, which he's always up for and loves, racing in front of his home crowd. And, if I was the same and racing in Canada and I was in the same situation, I'd celebrate the same way.
Yeah.
And the other one was he did make history as he became the 3rd driver, I believe, in F1 history to win at a track 8 times in his career, which is very impressive as well. So, I mean, was a record-breaking drive. I agree with Chris. I don't think it's his, greatest drive of all time. I think there's much greater ones and much more better masterclasses we've seen out of Lewis Hamilton. But at the same time, I don't think that should discredit a home win in a record-breaking win is what it was at the time in the leaderboards.
to that point, we also have to remember there was no fans at the 2 British Grand Prix that happened last year. So it was his
Yeah.
first time with fans in over, 2 years. So yeah, I don't take anything away from. Yeah, I agree with you, Don Tyler. It was the wrong comment to make. Distasteful is more the word than anything. But yeah, it's he's celebrating his home Grand Prix. Max is going to be doing the same when he's at the Dutch Grand Prix. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And obviously,
And I hope he does. I hope Max does, if he wins, celebrate
yeah,
the exact same way. Even if the incident, say there's the same incident.
yeah,
I hope Max celebrates the same way, because it's his home race.
yeah,
There's fans in the stands that are cheering for you, that are on your side.
yeah.
And how special it would be for Max to win at his home Grand Prix. The first home Grand Prix for him in his career, and the first Dutch Grand Prix in however long it is. I don't know it off the top of my head. Yeah, that'd be phenomenal as well. So I hope he celebrates the same way.
And he's probably
You
going to,
need
if he does
emotion.
win it, he's probably going to be the first Dutchman to win at that Dutch Grand Prix. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, for sure. And, maybe at the risk of adding just a little bit more gasoline onto the fire. Because, I'm having fun with it. I will honestly say that. I think that, the 2 fan groups and I was saying this to you, Tyler, off camera, that I think the videos that we done sort of criticizing Lewis Hamilton, we've gotten the most sort of negative reaction from the Lewis Hamilton supporters, and not all of them, but just definitely there's always some ones that we find that are incredibly ultra sensitive and for some reason just can't take any criticism of their driver, because they're the ones that get the most personal. And disagreements is fine, but there were just a couple of personal comments that we got on social media and the YouTube comments as well, which is fine. But expect them to come back your way, right? Just because that's just how it works. We have fun with it that way.
I do want to mention, we're talking about online comments, and the abuse that Lewis Hamilton, the racial abuse that Lewis Hamilton got online, was obviously completely uncalled for. And I know I could speak for both of you that we condemn any sort of racial remarks that were made to Lewis Hamilton, and that's just completely unnecessary. I mean, you can have your opinions on the race, and you can like or dislike Lewis, or you can like or dislike Max, or whoever it is, but to bring race into the equation, I think is very disgusting from those people who did it. And it's a select few, but it's still something we need to root out of the sport. And that's what F1 has been trying to do, with the whole equality, bringing everyone in and treating everyone the same. The campaign that they've been doing, races one, right? That's kind of what they've been promoting the last year and a half, and hopefully that campaign continues, and can kind of spread more word on ending racial abuse, and not only F1 but in all sports as well. I mean, it was terrible what happened in the England game to Rashford, Saka, and I forget the other lad that missed the penalty, but disgusting there as well. So anyways, hopefully we can end that and get back onto treating everyone with some respect.
Yeah.
Well, and I just have to add on that one too, is that personally, again, people are maybe not going to agree with me on this, and that's fine, but I think it was blown a little bit out of proportion in honestly my opinion. And I'm not saying that those comments weren't made, because they were. I did see some of the screenshots, but they were from people that had like 19 followers, 7 followers and stuff. And honestly, like, those people, we shouldn't even be amplifying any of that, just to not give it any attention. I went through hundreds of comments on all different types of videos on YouTube and Twitter, and I didn't see any racial abuse or anything like that toward Lewis Hamilton. People were heated, definitely, against both drivers. But I think that I know teams come out and made the statements and they got to do that type of stuff. But for me, it was just a little bit blown out of proportion, and it takes away from the focus that 99.9% of F1 fans are respectful. And that's what we try to do here at this show too, is we want to keep it strictly on the racing. And it doesn't matter which driver it is or which nationality or what color the skin is. We're just going to call it as we see it in terms of the racing. And I know there's a couple comments even on the video that I did afterwards that popped up on our channel. So I just wanted to push back on that a little bit, because when we're criticizing Lewis Hamilton, it's his driving. It has nothing to do with him personally. And we never talk about that stuff anyways, because we want to keep it to a racing channel. And Tyler and Shaker, the points that you brought up, I think adds a good balance and to the healthy discussion. Hopefully, that will continue on at least in the coming days or not. But yeah, I just wanted to throw the 2 cents in there as well. But it's a lot, right? It's difficult to put emotions aside because we all have our favorites. And as much as we try and put biases aside, they get in the way too. And I'm guilty of that. And I'm sure a lot of other people will admit to it as well. But I hope that everybody got a little bit of something out of the discussion that we just had there. And I thought that we did a pretty solid job of it in that regard too. So before we finish on Verstappen and Hamilton, I know this is exclusively what the podcast is going to be about. Let's just wrap up on the penalty as well. And Tyler, I'll start with you first and what you thought if the penalty was enough. And I think you already mentioned that you did think it was enough, but I'll go to you anyways. I just wanted to bring up a quote here, which I think summed it up pretty well, in my opinion. Quote, it says, ultimately, when someone destroys your race through an error, and it's kind of a tap on the hand, really, they're allowed to come back and still finish ahead of the person he took out. It just doesn't weigh up. And, that's a really interesting comment. And I would have to... Wait, hold on a minute. That quote is from Lewis Hamilton in 2018. Well, would you look at that? It's from the French Grand Prix. If you guys remember when Sebastian Vettel took out his teammate Valtteri Bottas, and then Vettel went on to finish ahead of Bottas in the race in P5, where Valtteri finished in P7. So we got Lewis's opinion already. Tyler, what do you think?
Well, obviously everyone's gonna have their bias to different situations that have happened. In my opinion, what bothers me more is the shenanigans of the team orders, and like I mentioned this earlier, the luck that Lewis had to come back in that race is astronomical. And I think that 10-second penalty would have been a lot more harsh if everything didn't go on Lewis's side. The red flag, like you mentioned, Chris, to repair that broken wheel rim. Lando Norris having a slow pit stop. He would have been stuck behind Lando. And Lando has been shown in times past that he's very tough to overtake. And Lewis has had a tough time overtaking him throughout the whole season. And the team orders with Bottas. I mean, that really frustrated me. I hated seeing that. I hated seeing it. I was a Schumacher fan when I was a kid, and I hated seeing Barrichello do the exact same thing. And that really irked me to see that as well. I would like to see Lewis at least have to attempt an overtake rather than Bottas just pulling off to the side. And I think if we would have seen the no red flag, honestly, even if it was just Lando not having a slow pit stop, I don't think Lewis wins that race.
Good.
Because I don't think that would. I think that would give him, or I would give Charles the 3 laps that he needed to be able to see out the rest of that Grand Prix. So it just, that luck that Lewis had, you can't write it. You need luck to win championships, and he had the luck on his side in Silverstone. And I thought personally 10 seconds was enough. The only way I could see it even more is I could understand and respect the decision if it was a drive-through. But I think a stop-go would have been too much for me.
Good points.
Yeah, so initially when I first saw it, I thought it was just a 10-second penalty, but from what I'm aware, it was also two points against his racing license as well, right?
Correct.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so after I heard that, I was more okay with it. Because in the end, he did cause a crash that ended up, getting a driver to the hospital. And I think it's more, it's more of a slap on the wrist. Yeah, Lewis, be more careful, but he should have consequences that impacts more than just the race, in my opinion. So in that case, I think it was fair to give him 10 seconds. And you're right, Tyler. It was a lot of luck playing on his side. We also have to remember Lewis Hamilton is a fantastic driver, and
100%.
pouncing on luck and making the best of your chances is what a world championship driver does. So yeah, in the end, with knowing that he got 2 points against his racing license as well, I'm okay with a penalty of 10 seconds. Like I said initially, when I thought it was just the 10 seconds in the race, I thought it wasn't fair enough. But the two points also makes it a little bit more fair.
Yeah, I think for me, what didn't feel right, or just if it just felt out of place, was that he went on to score maximum points, while the
Mhm.
driver that was in the alleged incident with him ended up obviously not scoring any points. So I think there's an argument to be made to maybe look at that for the future, but it's going to be hard to sort of police that, specifically. I think that I would have given him a 10-second stop-go penalty, in my opinion. It's interesting when we look at other incidents because it's obviously hard to compare, right? Different races, different stewards, everything like that. One off the top of my head was 2017 in Baku when Vettel went up alongside and hit Hamilton, just touched him on the wheel. He got 10-second stop-go from that, but that was because it was for dangerous driving. This penalty was given for causing a collision, so differences, right? If you think back to, I believe it was either the first or second Austrian race just this year, Kimi Räikkönen took out Sebastian Vettel. He got 20 seconds for that, and that was at the end of the race. So it's interesting, right? In comparing incidents, it's difficult to do, but that was just
Now,
yeah.
no, that's a good point you bring up about the Kimi incident, because I know they do give harsher penalties at the end of the race, because there's no pit stop to have to wait in your pit stop, right?
Right.
So because I know even like Latifi and Mazepin that race got 30-second penalties, I think, right? And they didn't do anything serious. They just didn't slow down for a waved yellow, I believe is what it was,
Yeah.
or double waved yellow.
And
So same sort of thing.
And on that note, we do know they're a little bit more lenient on the opening lap in the first few turns as well. So, yeah, it's stop and go could have been a thing as well. And I think in the end that would have probably also would have been a factor of Charles probably ending up winning that race. Yeah, I think having more of the penalties against the consequences of the action, because it was the lap one incident in the end, right? It's a turn 9, so I think that's the way we have to look at it. And I believe it was Maddie from WTF1 mentioned this too, is we have to look at a 10-second penalty based on the impact and not what car the person is driving and what driver it is. Like we know for a fact that Lewis Hamilton can make 10-second penalties seem like nothing. Um, but
He's too good.
They make them
if
disappear.
it was, if that was an incident, like I said, if it was happened, let's say between Stroll and Alonso, that 10-second gap is a lot more harder to cover in that middle range. So I think we have to take away for the fact that it was Lewis Hamilton and a Mercedes, and just look at it as if it was any other incident with any other car, it would have been 10 seconds in the end anyways.
No, that's a really good point, Shaker. Because say if let's use Stroll and Alonso as an example, and I'll use Stroll hitting Alonso out as the example because that's more likely. Say Stroll, what do you finish, 7th or 8th place?
Yeah.
That 10-second penalty probably would have put him down in 12th or 13th.
Okay.
Just obviously because you have to include the pit stop, you have to include not being able to get through traffic and the rest of it as well. So you're right. 10 seconds would be a lot harsher if it was mid-pack than it is with Lewis at the front of the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough because every incident is very different, and a lot of different judgments have to go into it. So, yeah, the fallout's going to be very interesting from this race, obviously, as we go into Hungary. And maybe I knew we were going to wrap up on these two, but it's just such a big story because, like you said, Tyler, we thought that this was going to happen, all season long, and I didn't actually think that it would in this dramatic fashion, but it did. So now it's already been a very tense relationship between Mercedes and Red Bull, not so much between the two drivers, Max and Lewis, but now this might change that dynamic as well. We know what type of personality Verstappen is. He's not going to back down. We know that Lewis isn't going to either. So just before we wrap it up, quick thoughts from both of you on what do you think the relationship and the drama that follows the rest of the season, what that's going to be like now?
Well, let me tell you, if this was in NASCAR, the crews would have just fought. They would have fought, and it would have been over. You fight, and the crews would have fought, and it would have been a massive brawl, and the whole situation would have been taken under control. The next weekend. And you probably pay someone back and dump them into a corner, and then you're even, and that's how it ends up. F1's a lot different. Not as physical when it comes to fighting as it is in NASCAR, you could say. So I think there will be a lot of animosity the rest of the season going along, especially into the summer break. You're going to hear a lot. Hungary will be interesting to see kind of the first time they come back against each other. Is Max going to be even more aggressive to Lewis? Is Lewis going to be more aggressive, or is he going to be more passive, knowing that, okay, I've already, had this incident. I don't want to have another incident with Max as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the drivers handle the situation. I think Max is going to be a lot more aggressive going for passes against Lewis now.
I don't think anything changes, to be honest. I think they're both very good professionals, because we've seen Lewis and Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel are really good friends, but when they're racing, that rival, that friendship has dropped. So I think when it comes to actual racing, it'll be the same as it is. We might see a little bit off the grid from Max a little bit at first, because we know he was a little not hostile, but towards Esteban Ocon. Making that mistake years later. Esteban Ocon with that incident in 2019 or 2018. So I think in terms of racing, we'll probably see be more of what exactly we saw in lap 1. Barring that incident, I think they're both still going to be aggressive drivers, and both going for the overtake and defending as well, because that's just the kind of drivers they are. They want to be the number one driver on the grid, and I think that's what we'll see. Which is, again, I've said this before, it's great for the championship season. So
I know right now for a fact the things between the two teams are going to get fairly ugly, because we're already at that point, and this is just going to add on to more of it. Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, Tyler, too, even though emotions were high, Red Bull pursuing any legal things or stuff like that, or race suspension, I mean, come on, that's not going to happen, and I think that's quite ridiculous at this point. I mean, Lewis is not a dirty driver, and he just made a mistake in this instance, but he's got a fairly good track record. He's obviously made mistakes in the past, and I know a lot of people were referencing Max Verstappen's history to try and sort of make some sort of justifications, but also keep in mind that the last 3 years, Lewis Hamilton has more penalty points on his super license than Max Verstappen has, which is pretty crazy to think about that stat. But Verstappen has cleaned up his driving, but he's always maintained his aggression, but he's just been able to reel it in. And unfortunately, it just so happened that it was this race in front of all the big home fans and the first really full crowd that this happened, which just amplifies it. But I'm curious what the two drivers, what their relationship is going to be like. Will they talk privately before Hungary? Will they completely ignore each other? But I agree with you, Tyler. I don't think that on track too much might not change, but I think that maybe Max Verstappen won't necessarily give as much room as he has in the first 10 races, and maybe if he's in a similar incident, maybe he's going to be like Lewis and he won't back out, and in his mind, he'll think, if we crash, so be it. So it's just really spicing up this championship even more than we already needed it to. So, a little bit of drama isn't too bad, I think.
No, I don't mind it. And I don't know. I kind of want to see a NASCAR little brawl between the pit crews.
Yeah, why not? Tell you what, I completely agree with you. But
and people will say, no, we don't want to see the violence. Let me tell you, people will come in droves if two crews start getting it, because it happens in NASCAR. You have a fight and people are all over. Oh my God, you can see the NASCAR, blah blah blah. These guys were brawling. If they did that, they would have the full attention of the world on them. So I don't know. I think it'd be amazing TV.
I'm thinking of the next really clickbaity YouTube video. Who wins in a fight, Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen?
Well, there you go. Imagine the Netflix series on that with if the two crews started going at it. Oh man! If you guys haven't seen NASCAR brawls, go look up like the top 10 best NASCAR brawls. If you're listening to this, it is phenomenal. You'll have a great time for the 15 minutes of videos on.
I'm just picturing like Helmut Marko throwing a spinning wheel kick to like Toto Wolff. Oh man.
Maybe not that flexible.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, who knows? We might surprise.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Okay, all right. We got that all off our chest, and I'm sure it's your turn as the viewers. If you're listening, you watch the whole discussion. Of course, let us know down in the comments below what you thought of the incident, what you thought of our opinions on the incident, and of course what will follow heading into Hungary before the summer break. Yeah, we've almost done an hour just speaking about this incident. I'll leave.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'll leave the last couple of minutes to you guys to talk about anything else in the race, and maybe the most important one being how would you. The craziness of this incident has just completely made us forgot about the brand new sprint weekend format that we trialed. So maybe I'll leave the last couple of minutes to you guys. What did you think of the first F1 sprint weekend? Did you like it? Was it positive? Was it negative? And any changes maybe that you'd suggest for the future?
All I'll say is this: look what it brought us. Look at the chaos it brought us. How could you not like it? Because Lewis needed to make up that position that he lost in the sprint race. This is where it all comes back to. In the sprint race, he got pole position, but lost it in the sprint race. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at the flip side, and Perez, it ruined Perez this weekend. Unfortunately for Sergio, I mean, he did get the fastest lap of the race and saved Red Bull a point from Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship, and for Max in the driver standings. But I thought it was all around a great weekend. I really enjoyed, having qualifying on the Friday, having the sprint race on the Saturday, and the race on the Sunday. It was a full weekend of racing. And every day, you knew you're tuning into something that was entertaining. Like, I usually don't tune in on Fridays for practice 1 and practice 2. I'll watch the highlights and see what happened, and I'll look at the timings and what the runs were. But I don't pay much attention. I won't sit there for an hour and a half unless it's a slow day and watch practice. But I watch Friday qualifying, I watch Saturday sprint race, and I watch the Sunday race. So I think it was a great weekend. I think I mentioned this in our live stream. I don't want to see it every race. I think a max of 10 races per year would be ideal. But I mean, we'll see what the FIA decide. We still have 2 more trial weekends, and we'll see how those go. I think we should have a full perspective of the 3 trial weekends to see if we bring this on for next year.
Yeah, I think after watching the highlights, because I didn't get to watch the entire weekend, but like Tyler said, I think it makes it quite exciting for the entire weekend, and you can't have it on every track. Like you wouldn't have it at Paul Ricard, you wouldn't have it at Monaco. That's the sprint race format will kind of die out before it even started if they started to do it at every race, but on fast tracks where there's a lot of overtaking, at the Hungarian Grand Prix or something like that, just having it somewhere where there's a lot of overtakes would make it interesting. But yeah, I think I think they would have to do it like that and not every race as well.
I'm with you guys on that point too. I did enjoy it, and the chaos that it brought us, I'm enjoying it even more after the fact. So I like the fact that every day of the race weekend was important. I'm interested to see or to hear. I haven't looked it up yet. The fans who were at the track of what they thought of the weekend, but judging from the photos and the tweets, it seems like everybody had a really good time with the new format. I'm with you guys. I wouldn't want to see it every single weekend. Maybe a max of, I'd say, 5 to 7 races per year. I don't want to see a permanent change to the format, because if you look at it, Hamilton's amazing lap on Friday eventually was irrelevant at the end of it. So I still like to have that prestigious qualifying event on the Saturday where we get to see who's the best driver over one lap, and then that goes toward the pole position statistics as well. So I don't want to see that taken away. I've said this a million times already. I'd like to see the old format return where one driver goes out, per in that Q3 session, and everybody just gets to watch that one driver do his thing. Just my suggestion, but maybe a couple of tweaks here and there to that sprint format would be nice. But overall, I'm actually kind of surprised at how much of a positive reaction I had to it, because I was highly skeptical going into it, and I wasn't a big fan of changes anyways to something that didn't really need to be changed. But overall, I think it was a good step forward and a lot of information for them to go into the future. And of course, it brought us probably the most memorable weekend of 2021 so far of this championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% right on the most memorable part of it. That we'll be talking about this for years to come. When we look in 5-10 years from now, 15 years from now, this will be one of the defining moments of this rivalry. Is this this accident that sparked it all, you can say, or it's going to be something that we talk about for years to come. So although it's kind of very frantic and furious now, enjoy it, because it's something that you look back on and go, oh, I remember this. What a crazy incident.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of shows a lot of signs for what the future holds for, for Formula One, because it is kind of a battle of Lewis Hamilton, the old world championship, and who we know against Max Verstappen, who we know is going to be a future world champion. With Lando Norris and Pierre Gasly, all these guys who are fighting for these top contentions, who are probably going to be podium winners in the end, and possible world championship depending on where they are. So the 2021 season overall has been really exciting, and this just adds more to it.
And even though there's been, a lot of negativity in the last couple of days between the two fan bases and just neutral fans as well, this is excellent news for Formula One as a whole, because I can't tell you, I've had just a few friends message me about my thoughts on the accident who, never even watched Formula One, and just text me out of the blue about, hey, what did you think of the Verstappen and Hamilton incident? So it seems like this has gone into the mainstream now, and the fact that these two great drivers are the centerpiece of this championship, like you mentioned, Tyler, we haven't really lived through a classic title fight like this. Vettel and Hamilton necessarily didn't live up to what we were expecting, and of course we're a little bit too young to remember the Schumacher-Hakkinen days. So, this is in comparison to the great Ayrton Senna-Alain Prost rivalries. It's the first thing that came to my mind was just those Suzuka accidents, and similar to what we saw here as well. So it's great, and it's nothing personal for any of them. We have great respect for both drivers. Obviously we have our favorites on the grid, but seeing these two going at it has just been a pleasure to watch. I'm so excited for the next race in Hungary. I can't wait. The fact that we got to wait another 2 weeks is going to be hard, but I'm absolutely loving it so far, and I'm so glad that we got this channel right now at the moment to witness history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, this channel has been a lot of fun to be a part of, and are slowly building a nice community that can have a nice civil debate in the comments for the most part.
Actually, according to the haters, we're a fledgling YouTube channel, so.
Oh, well, whatever. That's fine. We're having fun with it. We're enjoying it. We wanted to start this podcast just to have fun, and that's what we're doing. We always have fun on here.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And this was a really fun episode. This was a great discussion between the three of us, and I think that we've got good points across to all sides of the debate.
Can I give some shout outs to some other drivers that had a fantastic weekekend? Since
we just have to wait for Tim Tierney to come in and go 3-1 against Tyler to make this a full debate, right?
You mean Tim Hauraney?
Tim Hauraney, sorry, not
Tim Tierney is for a lot of people won't know this. Tim Tierney is a city councillor in Ottawa.
That's why I was thinking.
That's why it didn't connect to me that he made the mistake.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's exactly why I was thinking that name.
No, they're a good friend of the show, Tim Hauraney from TSN here in Canada. No, I would love to see his reaction. I haven't listened to his podcast yet this week, but I'm sure he's going to talk about that as well. So, good friend of the show. I'm sure he has some, great aspects of what happened.
Yeah, it'd be great to get Tim and Chris into this debate and see what they say.
Yeah, Chris Medlin as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I do want to give some quick shout outs because we should respect the other 18 drivers on the grid. Charles Leclerc, unbelievable. I think one of his best weekends as a Formula One driver. I was gutted for him that he didn't get that victory. I wish he would have won that race. That was an awesome drive by him. I led all but 3 laps of that race, and just really well done to manage the car, manage the the engine trouble that he had. It's just unfortunate to see Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, especially Daniel Ricciardo, a phenomenal weekend from Ricciardo. Really impressed by him. He's starting to slowly get his bearings in that McLaren. Lance Stroll had a fantastic weekend in the Aston Martin, climbing 6 or 7 positions in the race to score some great points for Aston Martin. So, and I will give another shout out to the other Canadian, Nicholas Latifi, who had, for him, a very good weekend. Finished 14th. Made up 4 places, I think it was, in the standings, not standings, well, wherever they finished. Can't think of the word right now. Finished ahead of Perez. He held Perez behind him the whole race. Perez couldn't get around him. So pretty well done to keep him in line. And the Williams showed really good pace throughout the whole weekend, I thought, actually, because, they weren't lagging behind like we saw the Haas's. The Haas's were nowhere. But the Williams were keeping up with the Alfa Romeos and the Alfa Tauris. So it was interesting to see. And, hopefully they can find a little bit more pace as the weekend goes, and one of them can score, him or George can score points for Williams.
Shout out to Sebastian Vettel for, despite not having the greatest race, but staying back and cleaning up
Yes.
afterwards.
Yeah, that was nice.
Big. Like he picked up like he had more than 6 or 7 garbage bags. There's a lot of garbage there. But yeah, shout out to him too. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, especially after a hot, long
Yeah.
race like it was. Good for him.
Yeah, actually, he picked up some rather large garbage too. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I mean, he was just incredible post race. I don't know if you guys saw that he picked up that trackside trash afterwards too.
Oh my god. I don't know if that's going to fit in that bag, Chris.
I don't know. I mean, it might be one of those Glad bags, those hefty ones.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Shit,
the contractor
yeah.
bags.
Just break it in parts, and I'm sure you can get it in a bunch of different bags. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that was a cool moment to see. Ended on a good laugh. Yeah, good shout.
Maybe F1 Authentics, they sell those carbon fiber pieces. I think I got some from the Red Bull. Those are some perfect ones they could use.
Or just sell Vettel's garbage bags.
That's what you could do that too. Someone would buy it.
I probably would. My only honorable mentions I'd also put in there as well. Fernando Alonso, who had some spectacular race starts in the sprint and also some great overtakes in the race, and also coined the next marketing term for the sprint weekend in Monza, in which he called it Q4, which I thought was perfect.
Yes, Q4. It was. Yeah, I like that. Him and Stroll had a very good battle this weekend.
They're pretty good friends. I saw them trackside afterwards. Like talking it up and everything. So it's nice.
It's been a really common thing with them in the last few races too. So yeah,
they always seem to be gravitating toward each other in the races. This is like a third or fourth time they had a really good battle and really respectable battle as well. It's nice to see, and for Stroll, that's a great learning experience. You have Vettel as your teammate, and Alonso's helping you, or being not a mentor, but having great battles with you on the track. You're going to learn a lot from those two.
I think Alonso is just having a lot of fun racing with all these young drivers and seeing the competition that they bring. Because I think there was an interview, I don't know if it was for Alpine, but I think he was asked of what his future dreams of as a driver, and he mentioned that nothing F1 related, everything to endurance racing and 24 hours of Le Mans. So I think he's just having a really good time being back in F1, and like I said, seeing all these young drivers come out, and a lot of them who probably weren't even born yet when Alonso started racing. So
yeah, seriously. Right, Kimi Räikkönen, first driver to race in 20 Grand Prix at the same track, I think is what it was.
Yeah, he did. This is his. Yeah, it was his 20th British Grand Prix. Yeah,
it's just a hobby for him anyway, so whatever.
Yeah, he had some more team radio gold too from this weekend. So
did he? I haven't listened to team radio yet.
Yeah, I got to see a little bit more.
His engineer at the end of the race was basically just like, we could have scored in the points if it wasn't for the accident with Perez. And then Kimi just kind of snapped back at him. He's like, yeah, well, we could have had better if car was better or something like that. He just shut his engineer up. Kimi is.
Yeah, classic.
My final one for me too, just to tap onto your Lando Norris point, still the only driver to score in every single race this season, and also set the record for most consecutive races in the points for a McLaren driver at 15. So Norris just continuing an excellent run of form, and nice to see his teammate back him up too.
And the youngest still, though, right?
Yeah.
I think he's still the youngest McLaren driver still to do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, final point.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's probably youngest driver in history, because I don't think Max or Lewis Hamilton ever scored 15 points in a row for a race. Thinking back on it.
Yeah, maybe
I'm not sure.
I'll have to get back to you on that one, but he might be the youngest, Yeah,
it'd be interesting to look at.
Yeah, definitely. All right, boys. Well, that will wrap it up for us on episode 112. A very thorough episode, and I think one that we'll remember for quite a long time. And I think we'll set the tone for the next 12 or maybe 13 races of the season. Of course, we've got the Hungaroring coming up in about a little bit less than 2 weeks' time by the time this episode is released. Good track for Red Bull historically. Of course, Mercedes have been strong there as well. So we're going to be interested to see what the fallout is, but we're going to be right there alongside you guys and bringing you the best coverage as possible that we can bring. for the 2021 season. So any final thoughts on your end before we send it out?
Let the battle begin. Let the battle begin.
Yeah. No, I have nothing to add.
All right, we'll finish with Tyler's one. That's a good one. That's a good wrap-up of the show. Tyler, Shaker, thank you both very much for joining me tonight on this episode. We really appreciate it. Guys, thank you very much for watching, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or on any other podcast app. We appreciate your viewership, and we appreciate the fact that you guys tune in to our channel week after week. It means the world to us, and we enjoy all the comments, the negative ones, the positive ones as well. And the interaction is always great. So if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. You just hit that red subscribe button on YouTube and also the bell so you get notifications so you never miss a live stream or a podcast like this following the race. We're also on social media at TBMF1Show. And thank you to our sponsors, Manscaped and the GPBox.com, for supporting this channel. And also check out the description below for exclusive discounts from our partners. For Tyler and Shaker, I've been Chris Cato. Thank you much for watching, and we'll see you next time. It's bye for now.